So tonight I have decided to try a sort of classic Italian dish, Parmagiana melanzane, or eggplant parmesan. And of course, because I can't leave well enough alone, I'm going to adjust the traditional recipe that I learned a little bit to put the Dani spin on it with some leftovers that I have. But first and foremost, we begin with our eggplant. We've also got fresh bufala mozzarella. We've got a couple of onions here and some tomato passata. We have fresh basil, and we've got Parmesan cheese. Now that's technically most of the original recipe, except for some flour and some oil because we're going to fry the eggplant. I am going to add garlic because Dani loves garlic, and I'm also going to add a couple of these serrano chiles. Now these are not traditionally in Italian cuisine, and they are spicy, but I like a little spicy, and I have chiles left over from one of my last recipes. So in just a second, we have a lot to prepare here, and we're going to begin our eggplant parmesan. We're going to begin with our eggplant because the eggplant actually has to sit for at least a half an hour before we can continue with the rest of our cooking process once we slice it. I'm going to be experimenting with slicing using my mandolin. I don't know if that's actually going to work, so you and I are going to figure this out together, because if it doesn't work, I got to go back to my sharp knife. So you see here a prepared eggplant, and I am going to try and slice it lengthwise. Let's see here. Ooh, hey now, look how pretty that is. So we're just going to slice up all of our eggplant just like this to get really, really pretty slices, and then we'll be able to continue with the process. So we have 3 beautifully sliced eggplants, and now what we're going to do, there's a reason that I'm using a colander, a bowl with holes in it. I'm just going to lay these out, maybe not in a completely flat row, but I want them all to be laid out because I'm going to salt my eggplant. And I'm not quite doing it just to season it. I need a lot of the water to come out of my eggplant in the next half an hour, because when we fry the eggplant, we don't want it to be soggy and yucky. So I'm going to lay out the eggplant, I'm going to salt it and put it back in my colander, and then let it just sit in the sink and leach water for about a half an hour. And they're ready to sit. Now we're going to take this time while the eggplant sits to both prepare our sauce and to prepare the rest of the things that are going to go into our eggplant parmesan or into our sauce. I'm going to go ahead and begin by dicing the onions. I'm going to prepare my onions like I prepare all of my other onions ever, which is by slicing the onion in half at the root, making cuts perpendicular to the root, but keeping the root intact. Careful not to get my fingers in the way. There's my onion done. Oh wait, there's one more. Boom. There's my onion done. And that finishes up our onions. We're going to go ahead and move on to our serrano chiles, one of the not parts of this recipe. I think I'm only going to put in 2, and these are going to end up going into my sauce. And I'm just going to dice these by first slicing and then just putting my fingers on top of the knife and rocking it back and forth until I get nice teeny tiny little pieces. And there are my 2 chiles finished. It's really, really important to be aware that if you cut hot chiles on a cutting board like this and you plan to cut anything else, then it's really important to wipe it off with a paper towel, or everything you chop will taste like chiles. And it won't hurt to wipe our knife. Let's move on to our garlic. I've seen a lot of different chefs in a lot of different videos talk about how to mince garlic properly. Here's my favorite way to do it. I place the garlic clove here. I press with the heel of my hand on the knife until I hear a smash and a crack. This lets me take the skin off of the garlic very, very easily. I chop away this little bit of root up at the top. And then the same as my chiles, I slice And then I put my fingers on top of the knife and rock back and forth until I get as small a pieces as I want. And there's my first clove done. Now we're going to move on to our mozzarella. We need to cut this into small cubes. So I'm going to begin by slicing my cheese into thick slices, very carefully. Mozzarella is very soft, and so if you slip, then the knife can cut you. And then I'm just going to dice and move off to the side in one of my bowls. And that's going to take care of our mozzarella. Last, but certainly not least, we need to grate our Parmesan. So I have here my block. I'm going to be using, see, I have a lovely grater here with 4 different sides for 4 different purposes. I'm going to be using the small cheese grater side. It's like this side, but smaller. And that's going to take care of our Parmesan. So we are ready to make our simple tomato sauce for our eggplant Parmesan. I'm going to heat up a little bit of olive oil here and grab myself a wooden spoon or paddle to get ready for stirring. I'm going to just preheat my oil a bit. I don't want my pan to be too hot because I'm just going to saute my onions and my garlic until the onions are kind of clearish and translucent, no more. I think my pan's probably pretty hot by now. Yes, it is. Just means I have to stir quite a bit to make sure nothing browns. And I probably won't add my garlic for another minute or 2 because garlic cooks very, very quickly at high temperatures. I think I'm probably safe to add my garlic now. And I'm also going to throw in my chiles, if you can see them through the steam. I'm next going to add all of this jar of passata. And what I like to do is put the lid back on and turn it upside down. The extra passata will fall to the bottom and then I can add it in a moment. I'm going to stir this up a little bit. And I'm going to turn my temperature down to medium-low. The very last thing that I'm going to add is all of the basil. And I'm just going to tear it like this and add it in kind of big chunks. It's going to cook down. And I certainly don't want to miss any basil leaves with all that flavor. I'm going to stir in my basil. And then my final step is to season with a little bit of salt and ground black pepper. And now, if you can see, right before I started stirring, my sauce was bubbling just a little bit. I want it to keep doing that for 10 or 15 minutes. That's just going to help cook a little bit of water out of the tomatoes and get all of our flavors blended. So as you can see here, I have laid out all of my eggplant. I have rinsed it just to make sure that I get some of the extra salt off, but I do need it to be dry, otherwise when I fry it, it's going to be soggy. So I'm just laying out my eggplant into a single layer on top of paper towels and then pressing into them with paper towels from the top. And all this is going to do is dry out my eggplant. I have a pan behind me with oil preheated over about medium heat so that when I'm ready to fry, I can move on ahead. And the only thing that we're going to do to these before we fry them is coat them in a thin layer of flour. So it looks like we're just about ready to fry. I have my oil preheated. I have my flour here to dust my eggplant in. And I've also prepared a cookie tray with some paper towels on it to place the cooked eggplant when I have finished frying it. All right, we are ready to fry. Make sure that you have a utensil for grabbing the eggplant when it's finished. And I've got all of my eggplant on the workbench behind me. So I'm going to start with one. The moment that you put this into the flour and dust it, it needs to go into the oil because the eggplant has enough moisture that it will soak up the flour and you'll get soggy eggplant. Make sure that you tap it to get extra flour off because all that extra flour is just going to end up in your oil anyway. And then we place it gently in the oil. And we're looking for those bubbles around the edge. That's perfect. And we're looking for a nice golden brown. So we're not quite there yet. I think maybe my oil could be even a little bit hotter. As you start to see the eggplant finish, you can take it out and shake it just a bit. You want some of the extra oil to come off. Lay it down on your sheet pan to drain. And we can continue this until all of our eggplant is fried. We are ready to prepare our eggplant parmesan. We have beautifully fried eggplant all finished and waiting for us here. We've also got our cubes of mozzarella, as well as our Parmesan cheese and our sauce sitting over here. So we're going to begin with just a little bit of sauce at the bottom of our pan, and this is just going to help the eggplant not to stick. We're going to begin with a layer of fried eggplant, and you can overlap it a bit, no worries. And then on top of this eggplant, we're going to sprinkle Parmesan cheese. We're going to place some cubes of mozzarella cheese. We're going to spoon over a little bit of sauce, and then we repeat. We've got some mozzarella cubes here and there. We do want to make sure that we're going to have mozzarella left for the top and Parmesan left for the top, and we want to reserve about a third of our sauce for the top. And actually, to be fair, I probably should have put my sauce on before the cheese, but oh well, it's already gone down. We just need a couple spoonfuls of the sauce, not too much, and so we're going to really spread it around. And then this is exactly why, because see, I have to spread it, that I shouldn't have put the cheese down yet, but now I know, right? Perfect. And we repeat. So as you can see, we've completed our casserole, our eggplant parmesan. I'm going to put this into the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or about 175 degrees Celsius. I'm going to cover it in baking foil and bake it for about 20 to 25 minutes. I'm going to uncover it and bake it for another 20 minutes until the top is bubbly and the cheese is just a bit golden brown. Here is our eggplant parmesan freshly out of the oven. I've just put in the garlic bread under the broiler, and so in about 5 minutes we should be ready to eat. This looks much more like eggplant parmesan than my first attempt, so enjoy.